If you guys follow any kind of gaming news related to Starfield, you probably have heard about the rumors on its possible release date in the near future. Just as a heads up, it is 100% a placeholder, and the game will not release the 23rd of March. But this rumor gives me the chance to talk about why it is very important that Bethesda finds a good window to release Starfield, and what might be the consequences of getting it wrong. I am sorry for those that would have preferred a hype-filled releases soon type of video like the many others I have seen in the past few days, but I am afraid I am just not that kind of guy. I do, however, think that one mistake in particular might be catastrophic for the health of the game, and a release in March would exactly fall into that scenario. But I'll go into more details about why I think that as we go along into this discussion. So, now that you know what to expect, let's jump right into it. It is no secret that the gaming industry has grown more complicated over the years. The possibilities offered by new hardware have increased the cost of making games in terms of both money and time, with AAA productions requiring investments of millions of dollars and being developed over the course of a long time, sometimes many years. Since we're talking about Bethesda, the PR nightmares they had in recent times make the situation even more complicated than it normally would be. This means deciding when to release a game like Starfield is even more critical, because finding a solid window gives it a proper stage to get the attention it needs, provided it at least deserves some in the first place. Let's remember that there is no going against the old rule of you can't polish a turd, meaning that if the game is poorly made, it will still fail regardless, but putting it out there at the wrong time could make things much worse. When it comes to choosing a release date for a game, and even more so in the case of Starfield, I believe that there are mainly three things a studio needs to take into account. The first one is competition against themselves, the second one is competition against others, and the third one is pressure from investors who want to get their money back. I'll start with this last point because I feel like there is never too much to talk about, so it's just easier to address it first. Investors want to make as much money as possible in as little time as possible, so they push studios to release games as soon as they can, often disregarding whether they're ready or not. This has been known to be a huge issue in the past, and due to the increasing costs of making video games that I was talking about earlier, it is only going to get worse. We also need to admit that Bethesda did have a rougher time compared to other huge studios, and that might mean having to rely more on investors to make a game as ambitious as Starfield, which would in turn create more pressure to release it as soon as they have it ready. However, looking at how new sci-fi IPs have performed in recent times, with the commercial failure of games like BioWare's Anthem and Respawn Entertainment's Titanfall 2, there does not seem to be a lot of reasons to consider making these types of games a solid investment. Of course, loss of capital is very real for any game as of late, but if I were an investor, I would definitely consider much riskier to go for a new IP than to put my money behind something like a new God of War. It is a sad truth about the modern gaming industry that we just have to accept for what it is, I'm afraid. But we can at least be happy that single-player RPGs seem to remain free of stuff like subscription models and invasive cash shops, which is already a big win in my book, at least for as long as that lasts. When it comes to competition against themselves, that should be the easy part, but in a world where a lot of games are released within a short span of time, it does get a lot trickier than it seems. In the case of Bethesda, Starfield and Redfall do not get along very well, despite one being an RPG and the other one being an FPS, especially if we believe the reported news of both games still being in rough shape and requiring more time to be properly developed. In Microsoft's latest Developer Direct event, Redfall got an official release date for the 2nd of May, and although it might still get further delayed, which would be nothing surprising for us gamers, this definitely sets it as a priority when it comes to which one needs to get the most attention from the market. Releasing the two games too close to each other would further split a player base that is already limited by the fact that both titles are exclusive to PC and Xbox platforms, which of course leaves the entirety of the PlayStation users behind, and Bethesda needs to avoid that at all costs. However, this brings us straight into the realm of how close is too close, which is a fairly complicated problem where opinions may vary a lot. From what I've seen over the years, a couple of months is usually enough time for a new game to be properly consumed by the vast majority of its casual players, leaving them ready to try out another title, even if it might have some similarities with the one they've just played. When it comes to competition against others, there is no denying that 2023 is sort of a difficult year to stand out. To name only a few, we have stuff like The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Diablo 4, Final Fantasy XVI and Street Fighter VI, all supposedly releasing between March and June. Names this big carry a lot of weight, regardless of the platform they're released on, so any studio trying to push a new IP, which is what Starfield is at the end of the day, should be very cautious to do so when these well-established, decades-long franchises are going out with their newest gem. But even if all this wasn't enough to discourage new releases during that time window, I think that the worst possible mistake would be exactly the one that was hinted by this rumored March release, since it would be way too close to the king of Q1 that is hands down Hogwarts Legacy. With that kind of hype, fueled by years of waiting, and a massive fanbase like the Wizarding World has managed to gather, going out with an open-world single-player RPG anywhere near next month, and probably for quite some time after that, is like willingly stepping on a landmine just for the fun of seeing what happens. And the interesting thing is that we have very recently seen what happens, right, Forspoken? I won't go into much detail right now, because that might be a topic for another video, and if you guys might be interested in it, let me know in the comments. But I'll just say this. Forspoken is the proof of what happens when you take an overall average game that would normally be considered just that and release it at the worst possible time. Anyway, back to the topic at hand, another huge risk in releasing Starfield too close to Hogwarts Legacy is that it would immediately fuel the comparison between Legacy's manually created open world and all the procedurally generated content Starfield will need to use, which is a sensitive topic that created a lot of controversy in the past, sometimes for good reasons. Trying to build an entire system of stars that players can visit is one thing, but managing to do so without making them feel like they're just randomly strolling through empty scenarios is much harder. That is not to say that the comparison will not be made anyways, because we all know it will be no matter when Starfield releases, but giving enough time between the two would make things smoother when it comes to public opinion. Which brings me to the point as to why I do not think a release in the first half of this year would be healthy for the game. Quite the opposite, in fact. Considering the release schedule for the coming months, I think a new IP like Starfield will struggle to find its place, even if the game is as good as I hope it will be, and I'd love to see Bethesda avoid unnecessary risks for once in their life. If they're still aiming for 2023, I consider somewhere around fall a much safer bet to give their game enough room to breathe and get the attention that would allow it to prosper, not to mention gaining additional development time that would make it more polished at launch, which is another big plus. Ultimately, I simply do not see a reason to go against the giants that are released in the first half of 2023, so they may as well skip those 6 months entirely and just call it a day. And with that, I think I covered pretty much everything I wanted to on why finding a good release date for Starfield is huge in making it succeed as it hopefully deserves. But what do you guys think? Do you still believe this March rumor might hide Bethesda's true intentions? I'll be honestly curious to read your opinions in the comments. If you enjoy my content on Starfield, you'll now see a link to the full preview I made that you might wanna check out. Also, I would really be grateful if you decide to subscribe to the channel, as it would give me an injection of confidence and push me to create more content, get better at it, and grow. As always, thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.